Well, Michael Roberts played 77 games with the Saints. Of course, the son of a Brownlow medalist, Neil, from 1958. He's had a fine media career post his playing days. Also represented Fitzroy and Richmond across the journey as well. And you would have found him riding the boundary and doing reporting and hosting TV shows and the like. But, Michael, thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure. Anything for St Kilda.
Now, we often start at the beginning of a playing career, but in your case, I wanted to go back even earlier than that. I mean, obviously, I think the old man won the Brownlow the year before you were born.
Yep.
But what was it like growing up, I guess, as the son of a St Kilda great, and obviously carrying that around in terms of, one day I want to do the same thing, I want to play for the club. And did you immediately have an appreciation for how good he was?
Well, I was always going to play for St Kilda. I was zoned. And I played under the father and son rule, obviously, as well. But I reckon I'm the only kid that was conceived on the rub-down table at the Junction Oval after we won the Brownlow. 9 months to the day I was born out of that changing room at the Junction Oval. So I'm a Brownlow baby. So I was always going to play for St Kilda. So expectations were high from day dot. But we played in different positions. Like I look at, say, a Hudson, Peter Hudson and Paul Hudson. They played similar positions in the forward line and whatever. But Dad was a centre-half back, punched on with Witten and a few of those blokes, where I was a rover, wingman type, more mobile player. So the comparison wasn't too bad. But the positive thing was the fact that I deliberately wore number 10. For the mere fact that I just was so proud and respected the old man. So number 10's been a very big number in our family. And the fact that you ran down the race for the first time, people knew who you were, so all you had to do was perform. And that gave me such self-motivation to see the pill and get it more than anything. So in those initial years, the motivation that the old man had set was enough for me to build a platform.
I mean, you're a Bayside boy. What was it like growing up as the son of Neil Roberts and barracking for the club and in that area as well?
Yeah, Beaumaris, we had our own rules down there. It was fantastic. A lot of us were in the surf a lot, pretty fit kids, and really enjoyed one another's company. And I must say, all my coaches and the Beaumaris Football Club, where I played over 100 games and a few premierships up through those underage years, was sensational to leapfrog me into the under-19s at St Kilda. So I played, I think, about 12 under-19 games under Bob Murray in the centre. Then they stuck me up in the reserves. I played 2 or 3 reserve games, and then I was playing in the seniors. So I just turned 18, and I was captain was Carl Dittrich. We played North Melbourne at Arden Street, and they were the reigning premiers. They'd beaten Collingwood in that drawn grand final, and that was my first game. And we knocked them over. We beat the reigning premiers out at Arden Street. Barassi was coach of the Shinboners, and Patterson was Mike Patterson, Swamp Fox was our coach, and we knocked them off. Blight and Glenn Denny.
Did you win that after the siren?
Rig and all those blokes. It was after siren. Very controversial. But it was just a ripper to knock those blokes over.
Most players don't have much exposure to clubs before they start and that, but you'll probably at the club so much you were sick of the place before you got there. But finally getting the red, white and black on and running out for the club, and just how was that first moment of stepping out the field and going, I'm finally here? How did that come across?
Gobsmacked. It was a childhood dream. Seriously, to sit up in the stand as a kid and watch almost every game and idolise, Darryl Bulldog sitting on his knee, Ian Stewart, Ian Cooper, Darryl Griffiths, Alan Davis, Carl Dittrich, And don't forget that the old man gave Carl number 10, and then Carl made sure that I got number 10. He was actually dating my auntie at the time, but that's another story altogether. But Carl made sure I got number 10. And, yeah, as you say, a lot of the nervousness and the doubt were taken away because I was just so used to the joint. I can understand how Ablett Jr. was with, Gary Sr. It was sort of that locker room, changing room, the smell of the joint. Wasn't intimidated at all. Failure didn't enter my head. I just wanted to get out there. It was just such an exciting time.
Number 10 obviously continued to be a famous number with the likes of Spider and Stephen Baker and the like in years to come. But as a kid, it was probably hard in 1978 to pinpoint what was going on at the club. But the club started the year brilliantly and finished the year brilliantly, went off the rails in the middle. Can you sort of pinpoint, a lot of people point to that Essendon game where they beat them at Moorabbin and got referred to as animals and for whatever reason lost the plot from there. Can you sort of pinpoint what went wrong? And it really felt like a wasted year. I think we beat every finalist in the last 6 weeks.
You've done your homework. That's exactly what happened. We knocked over all the top four, and it came down to that Carlton game. Remember, Robbie Muir accidentally hit Collins out in the wing. But we had a cracking side. Like, the spine was amazing. And you had George Young and Carl Dittridge and Perovic playing, and Pupsaru was third string in the ruck. Sidebottom was going okay. Obviously, you had Barks and Greeny Village. We had a good side. So to actually get my chance back then was fantastic. Yeah, we just, you just get up for the big games, and we probably let a few slip that we should have won, and could have played finals we should have played finals in 78. And then a lot of players left the following year. It was, I don't know what happened there. Big Carl left, a whole heap of blokes left in 79 and 80, and we had to fight hard through those years. They were really tough.
Tell us about that relationship with Barks, because, I mean, it's kind of, well, you two were kind of the pin-up boys at Moorabbin and, good mates and all that sort of stuff. But how did that relationship develop and come about?
He just took a shine to me. He was a Chelt boy. They played on a Sunday in the Federal League, and I was a Beaumaris boy, played on a Saturday in the South East Suburban League. But I got there. He was 3 years older than me, but we were inseparable. We were like serious brothers. And everywhere I went, he went. Everywhere he went, I went. And we were shoulder to shoulder, on and off the track. We used to almost wax out in the ground at times. That was a sad day. That was a slow burn, him passing. I didn't see him in his last month, and I saw him a lot. And I was shattered, but he just didn't want to show that he actually reached such a condition. He was skeletal, and I remember I was hosting a function for the club. It was a jumper presentation, and I was waiting for him to come into the room, and he was late. And Big Carl and Gary Colling and a few of those guys that were presenting jumpers, they were on the front table, and I remember him walking in, and I thought, geez, he looks yellow, and he's so much weight. And so I actually went out on the balcony. It upsets me now thinking about it. And he told me his condition, and we both cried and gave each other a hug, and then we got back up on stage and had to perform that night. I'll never forget that. But, yeah, to lose him at 39 years of age, and what am I, 62? He should be 65 now, Barks, and he'd be running things. He was so good in the media, on and off the track. He's a great player, tackler, high mark, so respected, but a larrikin. And that's the way you've got to be, I reckon. You've got to have a little bit of ego and arrogance and a little bit of larrikin. You can't be a librarian, but you've got to dedicate yourself to training hard and playing hard, and that's what Barks did. He deserved every accolade thrown at him, Trevor Barker.
You mentioned about Neil playing on EJ and that during his time, and you would have come up against Ted Jr. in your time, but I've also spotted the photo of yourself with both your dads, both of you two in your big V jumper. How was representing the state as well? We don't really get it these days, obviously. We get occasionally, like the game last year, but getting to play for Victoria, how was that?
I got brought up about the big V because the old man, he was so into state football. They had big carnivals and it was war against WA and even Tassie and South Australia, and the 80s was big because of Ted. So as I said, the old man was centre half back, Whitten was centre half forward. So they punched on St Kilda versus Footscray, and they were both captains. But then when they came to state footy, there was Barassi and Skilton and Nichols and the old man and Witten, and I could name the side, and it was entrenched for about 10 years. So for a person like myself or Trevor Barker or Robbie, they didn't play finals. We didn't play finals. So the next level was to play for Victoria. So I was absolutely rapt when I got picked to play state footy, especially with Barks. That meant so much to me. And I remember sitting next to the old man when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the AFL Hall of Fame. And I said, "You'd be rapt with this." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "I know why too, because Nichols, Skilton, Barassi, Witten, they'd all been inducted. And he was one of the ones that hadn't. And it meant so much for him to actually be recognised by the VFL, AFL, but it all stemmed from the state side, playing for Victoria. And so respectful for Norm Smith and all the great coaches that had them. Tony Jewell was my coach in the state side, and I ended up having him at St Kilda and Richmond, so I was very lucky. But playing for the Big V was everything. Fantastic. Loved it. And EJ made sure about my experience too, because EJ and I are born on the same day, the 27th of July. Teddy Senior and myself, and Alan Border. They're the two. There's a bob in the head on who's the best, but anyway.
So doing the sums, yeah.
He used to send me birthday cards every year. Can't repeat them; those shockers. But
it's not a bad triumvirate, is it?
Yeah. So very special to have him as a friend. He looked after me as a father figure and a mentor, and to play for Victoria, I've got fond memories of him and Witten, for sure, the old man.
I'm doing the maths. Happy birthday for last week. It was the 27th of July. But on just elaborating further on Barks, we often hear the story about when St Kilda were on their knees. I'm not sure of the specific year, but I think it was early 80s, about the time he won the best and fairest and famously donated the car back to the club. But also the rallying of the troops. Yeah, the rallying of the troops when the club was on its knees, accepting 22 cents in the dollar and that sort of thing. Can you sort of take us through the way that was sort of sold and the way that his loyalty rubbed off on everyone else and in effect saved the club?
I reckon it was 11 cents in the dollar. It was 1981, and a few of us had to take a lot of cuts to because the club was sinking, and there was enormous sacrifice, and that just made you inspired me more to play for St Kilda because of some of the knowledge on where we were situated, but also, as you mentioned, Barks' generosity. He just wanted to be a one club person. I ended up going to 3 clubs, but in hindsight, I probably should have stayed at St Kilda, I actually signed a contract or a piece of paper to go to Collingwood for 2 years under Matthews. And I ended up going to Richmond. Graham Richmond and Tony Jewell wanted me to go to Richmond, and I ended up signing there because I went to Melbourne High School and I played a lot of junior football with Mark Lee and Dale Waitman, and we won the 1977 Amco Herald Shield the first year, and then we were all playing league football in 78, and those 2 boys actually played in a premiership in 1980. So I thought, let's go to the Tigers. I love their ruthless attitude, eat them alive stuff. And I thought playing on the MCG every second week would be sensational. The best stadium in the world, and we've got it in our backyard. So that's why I went to Richmond. I'm glad I did.
That 80-81 period, probably an often forgotten period of St Kilda's history, is the Alex Jesaulenko time at the club, obviously fresh from 79. People often forget the St Kilda chapter of Jez's career. Can you sort of take us through sort of his influence and his time there?
If he walked into this room now, I'd go, "G'day, Dad," and he'd go, "G'day, son." And that's how we greet each other. So close I got to Jezza. A lot of people didn't find him much of a tactician. He was playing coach for us, but he gave me the license to attack the footy, and he took a personal interest in me, and I respect him and I salute him, and I learned so much from Alex Jesaulenko as a coach, as a player, and also almost a father figure. I even took him out for lunch, and I know the Carlton boys do that, but I just think that his influence on me was enormous. He was only at the club for a short time at St Kilda because of conditions and situations, but I can publicly tell you that I respect him so much, and he was so important for my progress at the time. He was influential in me actually playing for Victoria and taking that next level, Alex Jesaulenko.
So I was going to ask about what happened in 81, because that was, I mean, quite clearly your best year of football. You know, played 21 games, got a ton of the ball. I think you averaged about 23 or 24 touches a game. State rep, obviously, as we've touched on, 8 Brownlow votes. What was it that all kind of came together in 81 for you?
No pressure. I didn't have to think about it. All I had to do was think about footy and getting the pill. Seriously, that's how basic my understanding of the team plan and how Jezza actually sold it to me. And then I got to the end of the year and I had a ripping year, and I got stress fractures training for a marathon. Ron Clark was the fitness guy down there, and I started running, and I had an athletics background. So I did, 800s, 1500s, all that through sub-junior and little athletics, and which was great fitness to play league footy. It was a great platform, but I got stress fractures in both feet and I missed 12 months. So then I came back and I had such a good start to the season in the first 5 games, and then Sydney Swans, 27-minute mark, we just hit the front. Jacko had just kicked his 10th goal. I just shoved it down his neck, and I went for a mark and twisted my knee and did my anterior and posterior cruciate. Barks had been knocked out about 5 minutes earlier, and we lost the game by 3 points. Didn't play again. So I played 5 games in 2.5 years after really setting up a certain level, and that put me behind the 8 ball. But I had to work damn hard. I got back in 11 months back in those days, because that's when they really open your knee and pull your whole knee out and chip away, and it's a shocker. And you're in plaster for 3 months of the year, so it looks like your forearms hanging out of your board shorts. Everything just withers away. There's nothing there. Your vastus medialis, all that around your knee is just buggered. So to get back, I had to work hard, and then I just couldn't maintain it. It just blew up at half time, and I had to have injections and whatever. So to get to the end of my career in 87, I did as best I could. I just had to survive.
So you only played a few games over those few years, you're saying, and in that time we had a couple of linchpins either end of the ground come in from 2 country kids. Big guy up forward, big guy up down back. 2 of them come in, and how were they together behind the doors? We hear a lot of stories about their travels up to the game and then back to Ballarat again, but inside the club, could you see that the 2 of them were just like, yep, they're the 2, they're together, they're the best mates? And could you get a word in with them, or how was it when they're on a roll?
You're talking about Spud and Plugger, aren't you?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, Frawley and Lockett, they're bookends from Ballarat. Seriously, they terrorised me in a good way. But if you got them verbally, they'd hit you physically, and they were scary people. Plugger, if you knew Plugger, one of the nicest, kindest guys, but if you didn't and you rubbed him up the wrong way, you'd know about it. He'd desire you to actually go into the hole, and he'd give it to you. Where Spud was a softie, and he was all froth and bubbles, seriously. And then there you go. We lost 2 skippers, Barks and Danny Frawley. As I said, Barks was a slow burn, and Spud was so sudden and so upsetting. So, but the 2 of them were they were scallywags. Got into so much trouble and got out of it. blamed everyone else. Best form of defence is attack with both of them, and they got up to mischief. But that's what they did in Ballarat. You know, there's 1,000 pubs up there, and they told lies, but they actually performed on the track, didn't they? They were so good for Victoria, so good for football. Like the delivery into the St Kilda forward line wasn't flash, but Pluggered just kept kicking goals, and wasn't he a beautiful kick, the best ever. And Spud was just like an unmade bed. He looked like the bottom of a parrot cage, seriously. But he got the job done. He's actually quite a quick bloke for his size, because I think the family have had sprinters. The old man was fast, his brothers were quick, and I think he was just handed those genes. But outrageous, out of control, enjoyed a good time. But we sort of had to curb that occasionally. Yeah, fun and games.
You can tell, I mean, just hearing you talk about those guys, you know, the emotion in your voice when you talk about them. And I think for us, you know, having watched those guys, I think we feel it in a different way as fans and guys who love the club in a different way. Well, I remember we did this show, you know, it was a couple of days after Spud passed. And, you know, there were tears that night, and you know, a few of us got together at Moorabbin and sat in the centre circle and had a beer for Spud in the centre circle at Moorabbin. It's even now, you know, talking to you guys and you know, your colleagues and players who have come after you and talking about Spud and Barks, you know, for us it's difficult to talk about. So I can only imagine, you know, for you guys how hard it is to talk about. But can you tell us what those two specifically mean to you and to the footy club?
As I said, Barks was like a brother, seriously, and he enjoyed the things that I enjoyed. And we had a holiday house. We've had a farm and a holiday house down at Lawn, so he was desperate to get down there every year. We travelled up to Queensland a lot, trips away, but we really enjoyed our time. And I just sort of knew where he was on the ground, and he sort of knew where I was on the ground. Spud was just starting as I was finishing, so I had to play against him. So I know that he was trying to eyeball me there, just a fleeting moment he could have got me, but he looked after me. But with Spud, I knew that he was up and down, and we went for long walks and we talked a lot, and there was a lot of emotion, and I won't go into it, but there were times where I virtually had to grab him by the hand, and we jumped off the pier, and you know that he got quite emotional talking about things, and his behaviour patterns changed, and he needed reassurance, and you knew something was up. And then for me to be told, I think that I was playing golf at Royal Melbourne, and a bloke was actually in tears in the car spot, and he was a mad St Kilda supporter, and he said, "Have you heard?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Your great mate Spud, he's gone." And I really had to gather myself because it was so sudden, and it still affects me thinking about it, because there's so many situations that Spud would be with us and enjoying it, and on the TV and the radio and the games, and you know, he'd be enjoying Banger Harvey coaching for Collingwood, because we know how much that senior coaching role meant for Banger, and Spud should be here to experience that. There's situations every day like that really hurt me, and I go up. I fluctuate in emotions. I get sad, then angry, and then disappointed. So yeah, because we thought we had it in control, but obviously it was out of control. And yeah, not a day goes past I don't think of both of them, because they were so close and so involved in my life.
Yeah, getting the chance to work with Spud for a while, I guess my observation was that he was just a big sponge. Like, he'd take in everything and he'd feel everything so deeply and convey, you know, almost that emotional influx would stay with him because he was such an emotional character, and yeah, you could often tell, that it was getting heavy and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's probably in a lot of ways we've had a tragic history as a football club, but they're the two saddest chapters in our club's history, I would think, in many respects that we've spoken about. But that best and fairest night, I mean, how was that from your point of view in 2019 with yourself and Berkey up on stage, putting that together after Halves and Lowered spoke?
Yeah, and didn't they speak well, both boys? And to hear the stories of Anita and the three girls, and Barks's mum as well. That is one big crocheted St Kilda blanket, really, over the lot of us. And that was actually flooding through my head as I was on stage, and Lowe and Banger and Berkey and all those blokes, they were so close because they had success. They won a lot of games together, and they were a sniff away from winning a premiership in '97 against Adelaide, wasn't it? So they could have had real success then, but it was really difficult to get yourself up and about, knowing that there was so many people were affected, and sitting out in that audience. Just to even get up on stage and talk about it was quite emotional, but we got through it. And it's amazing what you can do under duress if your mindset's right. And all I did was think, okay, Spud's a big character. Barks was as larger than life. They deserve a good send-off, and that's what I'm going to give them. So that was in the back of my mind the whole time. I wasn't going to let them down. I wanted to tell stories and make sure that people knew exactly who they were and how respected they were within the football world and also the football club.
I saw when I was trying to look into a bit of your history, I found a picture of you with Elton John from 91 or from 81 or 82. Can you tell us the story behind that photo?
I think he owned a soccer club, Watford.
Yeah.
And he was entrenched in our football because Molly, obviously, is a big St Kilda fan, and brought him along to a game. And he had a rock concert at Festival Hall called the Jump Tour, and he invited Barks and I along. And it was around that time, so Molly was a big influence. He brought Olivia Newton-John and Elton John, and he had everyone there. And that's why the disco was a cracker as well, We used to walk in and worship that bloody disco ball more than a Sharon half the time. But but I remember Elton, he said, listen, I want to launch this tour. And I think it was part of St Kilda backing his Jump concert and getting involved in the footy club. And then he ended up, we did something on Countdown too, I think, I'm sure, back in those days. It was all Molly influenced, so I just went along with the ride. It was a good ride.
You say you're blaming Molly for that. Is he also to blame for getting you onto Sail of the Century, modelling the prizes and all that sort of thing, or who's behind that?
Well, I modelled for 10 years, 5 years with Fran Scotty and 5 with Vivian's, through my whole career. And now I don't know whether it was a good move or a bad move, because especially Sail of the Century, because we used to tape the whole 5 shows on the Wednesday. So we used to train Monday, Tuesday, tape the shows Wednesday, a light run Thursday, pick the team, run out Saturday afternoon against Hawthorn, Carlton or Collingwood, try your best. And then pleasant Sunday morning, you had to run out all the your sore spots, and then it'd all start again. But a bloke like Tony Shaw and these guys knew that I taped the show every Wednesday, 5 shows. So I remember playing out at Victoria Park, and I dived on a ball, and Tony Shaw just went bang and just hit me in the eye, and I had a fat lip, and he said, now do Sail of the Century. So they were onto it. They wanted to mess me right up, so I was a target, that's for sure. They wanted to mess me up, but then Crawford came along and a few others, and then everyone started to promotions. So if you're not doing that now and making a quid off the ground, you're not going hard enough. But it was a great life. Seriously, the girls I worked with and Tony Barber and that gave me my introduction into football. And a bit like footy, you got used to the floor managers and the cameras and Channel 9 and all that. So when I did happen to retire in '88, Gordon Bennett rang me and said, "We want you at Channel 7. And if you're half the performer as your old man," because he was World of Sport and he's a Hall of Fame journo as well, we're going to take you on. So you're going to read the news. You'll be working under Bruce McAvaney on Sports World. You'll be doing live football, and you'll be working with Jennifer Kite and all that. Done. I said, "Where do I sign?" Because my knee was buggered. And that gave me my introduction into a whole array of roles within the TV realm. So I was 7 years at 7, 15 years at Channel 9, and I've been at Triple M for 23 years. So I've been able to do the TV and the radio, which a lot of people can't do. And if I had my choice again to pick a career outside of football, I would do exactly the same as what I'm doing now, hosting shows, and doing the radio and the TV. I'm privileged. I'm so fortunate. It's fantastic.
Last one from me, sort of media related. One of my favourite times, we were sitting at the MCG. I was doing boundary, and so were you. It was 2019. It was pissing down with rain. I reckon Richmond was playing West Coast or something like that, and St Kilda were playing Freo at Marvel at the same time. And we kicked the last 2 goals of the game and won by 3 points. I remember watching that on my Foxtel app with you at the end of it, sort of closing out the latter stages of that game when I think it was Josh Bruce kicked the winning goal. But in terms of your media role, how do you find, sort of watching the Saints in this current landscape where you're still sort of working on match days, you might be impartial, sort of sitting down there boundary side, and I guess how have you observed the roller coaster of the last 2 years?
I've switched off a little bit. I used to be quite a passionate St Kilda supporter, and then the game has changed so much. It's not the game we used to play, so it's easy to turn off because I can't picture myself playing what's unfolding today. It's keepings off today, where 80s it was man on man. You had Shimmer for the day, Ashman or bloody Gary Wilson or Flea Waitman or Cracker, and you had him for the day. Like Johnny Platten was a nightmare, but you had him for the day. There was none of this switch off and on, 12 on ballers, back flankers running in waves out to the fat spot, zoning up. There was none of that. So it's a different ball game. So you can actually switch off a little bit. I still follow it. I still follow the Tigers. But I remember that day, and I used to get passionate about it, but I don't anymore. I don't. It's my I don't know whether it's age or the fact that the game's changed so much. I just can't relate to it like I used to, because back in the day compared to now, it's a different ball game. Simple as that.
It is certainly a different game. We know kind of how corporate the game has become, and we've lost some of those things that made the VFL and AFL so great, like the local grounds and that sort of stuff. But Moorabbin, I mean, you played your career at Moorabbin. I know walking out onto the ground, during the week or whatever, and with the St Kilda jumper on, you get a little bit of a tingle and a little bit of a thrill walking out onto Moorabbin wearing your St Kilda jumper. But what did that mean to you to play at Moorabbin, and what does that place mean to you now? 2 things:
thumping crowd. Remember, like the days when there was a thumping crowd in the animal cage, and the whole thing was humming. It was all, the stand sort of moved. And you could feel that as a player. You don't get to feel that too often at other grounds, but Victoria Park's another one. It was like it had a sort of a life of its own, the ground. Once it was, the mojo was in the joint, The other thing with Moorabbin is that it's the same dimensions as the MCG. Now, we're in a rain belt there, so that's why it used to get pretty boggy in the middle. It had nothing to do with the sprinklers and blokes watering the middle, but for some reason it got very, very muddy. And that was our game plan, because Jeff Saru, Pup Saru, was only 6'3". So he'd go up in the ruck and punch the bloke's arm. So we knew that the ball was going to drop to his feet. So that was our way of getting it out. Greg Burns, myself, whoever was in the middle, in you go and whack it out. It wasn't complex. It was see ball, get ball, and get it out to someone flashing past. And we had some dirty bastards too. Like Pup Saru was. Matt Rendell is still scared of Jeff Saru. And I was scared of Greg Burns and Joffa Cunningham. And the meek and mild one was Robbie Muir. He was just all arms and legs. But we had some henchmen, and they were good at it. They didn't like playing St Kilda, especially at Moorabbin.
Do you have one memory or one story that kind of sticks out in your mind as your kind of favourite moment at Moorabbin?
Moorabbin? I've got a good one and a bad one. The bad one is I had a shot for goal against Geelong, and I got pushed in the back, and it went through for a point, and I was 40 metres out, 45-degree angle, and I had to kick it to win. And, Jesus, I missed it. So I remember my little brother in the press box. He's only tiny. He started crying, apparently. And one of the only games my old man saw me play, because he was off doing other games for World of Sport, and I blew that. I played in 2 draws, Richmond, the MCG on Francis Burke, and we played a draw out at Arden Street against North Melbourne. 2 really high-class games. I'll never forget them. Kick 5 against Melbourne, and that was great because the coach was Barassi. So I loved giving it to Ronald Dale. And one of my fondest memories was when Jezza took over and we knocked over Essendon. I think it would have been 80 or around that time.
80,
yeah. And yeah, was it 80?
Mm-hmm.
And Jezza was in the half forward running around, and that's when I knew that it was so exciting to win that match, and for Jezza to be there, and that crowd was, it was just jam-packed. That sticks in my head.
I think that was the day Phil Carman got suspended for 20 weeks. I'm pretty sure that game against Essendon in 1980, when we won by 3 points when he headbutted the boundary umpire out on the side of the ground. And I think he got 4 for striking and 16 for the headbutt on the umpire. So I think it was for some reason that stands out. But
it was Carberry, I think his name was.
Yep, I think so. I think that's right. But Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully see you at the footy soon, and appreciate you telling us a lot of the stories. A lot of them are certainly quite raw and quite emotional, and we appreciate your time.
Yeah, I just love playing for St Kilda. It's in my blood. I'm so happy that my old man played there, and to follow his footsteps, and I can relate to the Silvanis and Hudsons and Wittens and whatever. So it's just a fantastic thing that I'll take to my grave. And they say strength and loyalty, it can't be any truer. And the fact that we've talked about Barks and Danny Frawley, and hopefully a few of the St Kilda boys can see this, it means a lot to me. You got to remember where you came from. And I tell you what, playing for the Saints has given me an enormous start to a life, and as I said, I love every second of it, and I'll continue to enjoy it for sure.